Let's get to the news. All right, let's get into the roundup for this week. And by the way, if you are new to the channel, I put out videos every week on culture war topics and issues. So please consider subscribing, not just on YouTube, but also on Rumble, because I will definitely eventually be censored on YouTube. So Rumble is a better free speech video platform. So first of all, this week, we have to talk about Dylan Mulvaney. So Dylan Mulvaney, he's basically a trans activist. He's had a really good year. Dylan has. He kind of came out. He used to be a guy. Now he identified as a girl after coming out last March, and really chronicling his transition or journey into being a female through a series that he calls Days of Girlhood. He has over 1 billion views on TikTok, has over 8 million followers, and as I said, he's been having a really good week, even a really good past couple of months to really rise to fame and sort of notoriety for trans issues. And some of those highlights include, he was invited to the Forbes Women's Summit. He struck a deal with Ulta, like beauty products, and did like a 1-hour podcast with them, basically talking about his sort of transition. And then this past week on Friday, he was actually invited to the White House to meet Joe Biden, have a conversation with him. And then that series is coming out probably Sunday or Monday. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me in kind of a weird way is the focus on children. So notice that he names his TikTok series Days of Girlhood. And this is a 25-year-old person, so legal adult. But for some reason, there's this weird tendency to dramatize and I guess market his transition journey not as a days of womanhood or becoming a female in general, but particularly days of girlhood. So he's almost like comically over the top. He describes women parts as Barbie pouches. He goes hiking in heels. He's super, clumsy and eccentric and kind of goofy, and he's almost putting on like kind of a caricature of what it means to be a woman. And this seems to be getting people a little upset, but it's also helping him to get more popular, right? But anyway, what I find kind of peculiar about his whole experience so far is, again, his focus on children. So he says here, right, it's day 222 of becoming a girl. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm going to the White House to speak to the president. And the influencer is wearing a shirt in the video that says, "Don't mess with trans kids." So again, focuses on days of girlhood, being a girl, and don't mess with trans kids. Okay. You know that phrase, I think I may have girl bossed too close to the sun. Well, that's how I feel today, because I got to sit down with Joe and ask him a bunch of stuff around trans issues, and I wanted to represent my community. And he says here, and you know what, as silly as I am on here, I am ready to step up and show that trans people, we're not going anywhere. And that trans kids, again, trans kids, they deserve a fighting chance to be their true selves, right? So there's this, I would say, emphatic kind of focus, not just on the trans community as a whole, but I would say his primary focus seems to be on trans kids in particular. I just find that to be kind of peculiar to me. And I feel like this individual is really slowly kind of eroding and erasing like what it means to be even a woman in society and what it means to be a child in society. He's kind of displacing and stealing the limelight for or from them, I should say. And this comes on the heels of his kind of big Ulta Beauty, I guess, deal that he recently struck. It seems to be reaching ahead, this whole controversy around Dylan, because women are not that happy about it. So some of them, they're calling them TERFs in this like left-wing article, are boycotting Ulta Beauty. Right. So based upon his sort of caricature, his talking about, hey, I can find love and be a parent and a mother as well. And all of these things, people just seem to be, or at least some people, some women seem to be kind of fed up with the guy. They're considering it like woman face, which is like a reference to blackface in the times of old. And Ulta Beauty is standing by him, right? So they're saying here in the statement that they released this past week, we believe beauty is for everyone. So what seems to be the case here is they're making a gamble. They're making a gamble from a business standpoint, and they're saying the opportunity to increase our market share is more important than the controversy that we're getting from women who may not want to do business with us anymore. So we'll see in the kind of months and years to come whether or not that sort of holds water. It might make sense, and the reason I say it might make sense from a business standpoint is we just look at the data, right? So this is a study that came out this past year, I guess in June, from UCLA's School of Law, the Williams Institute. And it said that the number of teenagers and young adults in the U.S. who identify as transgender has doubled in the past 5 years, according to the study. Okay, so the age ranges are between 13-year-olds and 24-year-olds, and the stats here are basically twice as big as they were 5 years ago. So they may actually be making a smart business decision here. If the trans movement is here to stay, and it's particularly having an outsized effect on children and on young men, then 5 years from now they can stand to really grow their market share quite a bit. And consider this stat as well. It says overall, the Williams Institute found that the percentage of adults who identify as transgender has remained steady at 0.06% since its last report. So what does that mean? Adults, still 0.6%. Children, or I should say young people, right, teenagers through young adults, it's doubling. So what does that mean? The growth is coming not from the adults, but from the children. And that has been the focus of Dylan and the whole trans movement. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this gamble plays out between the quote unquote TERFs who are against it and those who are advocating for it, and whether or not that plays out. It's a big market, right? You can basically create a new market, right, targeting these young transitioners, and maybe that's what Ulta is moving down. And then I wanted to make one comment about the schools, right? So a big way, so there's 3 ways that they succeed in this culture war battle between the quote unquote TERFs, or just non-trans people, and the actual trans community that is targeting children. The family and changing the nuclear family. 2 is the culture and basically rewarding people as brave and noble and dignified for coming out as trans. And then 3 is the schoolroom, or the school board, I should say, or the classroom. So this black pastor really came out this past week. He's from North Carolina. He went to a school board, and he's basically rebuking these people. He's like, God is going to judge every last one of you for the decision that you made. It was in Wake County. He comes, he's a pastor again, and he's lecturing them. He says, Luke says that it's better for a person to have a millstone tied around their neck and thrown into the sea than for anyone to harm or damage a child. God's going to judge you. And one of the interesting things that he says here is, even if you just taking it from a non-religious standpoint for a second, he says, this past year we spent $1 million on a diversity office. And how did that benefit black children? How did it benefit children in general? Well, 78% of children in 3rd through 8th grade, black students, are not proficient in math in Wake County. So clearly this shows you what this effect is having on the kids. They can, talk about, a million different pronouns, a million different genders, being exposed to adult content at a young age through their libraries and all this woke stuff. But they can, do basic math and arithmetic and reading and writing, right? They're failing where it counts the most. And this has actually been accelerated through the pandemic because, these kids have been, shuttered in their homes for the most part. And so it's really, really bad. He's describing it as cultural Marxism and grooming, which I think he's correct about. So interesting kind of, let's say, tug of war here happening. Obviously, I'm going to move this to the S tier. The kind of trans agenda is a major topic right now. And it's there for a couple of different reasons, right? We have some stuff in the periphery that make that the case. There was a panel at St. Louis University in which a non-binary person remarks about Matt Walsh and What is a Woman documentary that he put together. And he says here, quote, "You can't stop the Matt Walsh. You can't stop it." And this is actually resonating with what Matt Walsh himself said earlier this year, which is that this is a fight that we can win. So look at Matt Walsh. Like his subscribership, it was like 700,000, I want to say, in like May of this year. Then he put out What Is a Woman, and now the guy's approaching like 2 million. It's insane. Like he's basically generated a movement that is doing astronomical like damage / impact to the trans movement as it pertains to children in particular, which is a cause that, you know, a lot of people can get behind. And then the week wrapped up, in fact, speaking of Matt Walsh, with a big Nashville rally where he and Daily Wire basically got together in downtown Nashville, and they basically did a rally. And it says here on the banner, the rally to end child mutilation. Okay. And think about the framing of this, right? Anti-trans rally. That's not true. I just showed you data, right? And I showed you Dylan, and that suggests that they are after the kids with this, not adults. I think a lot of people on the right wouldn't care so much if it was just adults being adults and making their own autonomous decisions with themselves and their bodies. That's on them, right? But the reframing by the kind of like left-wingish Nashville scene here is that, oh, it's against trans as a whole. That's not really the case. The focus is on these kids who are making adult decisions. I mean, you can't even get a tattoo, but you can go and spend 6 figures to go mutilate your body and make irreversible, life-changing decisions to it. No, of course not, right? So that is kind of what rounded out the week. We'll keep you posted as things develop on that front. All right, so next up, we have to talk about the concept of big fines. So Alex Jones, he's been in the spotlight once again because they want to charge him unfathomably high amounts of money for the whole Sandy Hook incident that occurred many years ago, back in 2012. So part one of this is that a jury awarded the families who were damaged by Alex Jones's insensitive comments about the Sandy Hook tragedy nearly $1 billion. So the jury awarded them $965 million. And I thought that was the end of it. But then the families kind of came on top of that and said, "Judge, please impose the highest possible punitive damage for this conspiracy theorist." And that ended up being an ask of, you guessed it, $2.75 trillion, which I'm told is roughly the GDP of France. So fun times, very interesting stuff. Just like comical levels of lawsuits. And like, given the way that Alex has been prosecuted and persecuted, both, you would think that he was actually the culprit of the Sandy Hook massacre. Like, he's getting more heat, if you would, than the actual culprit himself, who actually, was behind the trigger. So kind of crazy to see this whole saga develop. And speaking of gigantic fines, I had to make a mention of George Floyd's family suing Kanye West for saying that it was actually fentanyl that killed George Floyd and not Derek Chauvin's knee on the neck. And this is crazy, right? Because back when this happened, Kanye had actually given them $2 million. If you check out the documentary that Candace Owens put together, The Greatest Lie Ever Sold, she herself gives an undisclosed amount of money to the sort of housemates of George Floyd. I think she covers like his rent for like maybe a year or two or whatever it was, and like paid to get his car that was left there removed. So both of them have given material support directly to George Floyd, right, when nobody else has, including BLM. And yet, in this case, Kanye is getting sued, not for defamation because George Floyd is deceased, but for, emotional damage, effectively, and trauma, by opening up this wound, if you would. And this is a big deal. The reason I say it's a big deal is not because of the financial amount of $250 million, but because if this goes to court, it'll be an ongoing topic of conversation. So I would actually say that if like, this is actually potentially going to backfire on the people who are suing Kanye, because this is making normies question what happened, and it's going to keep it in the spotlight. So if this goes to trial, there will be a broader conversation over the months and months and months to come. Maybe, I don't know, discovery or whatever people do, testimonies, etc. So if it ever gets to that point, it's actually going to make, like, as the facts come out, because the facts are not favorable to George Floyd's family, that's actually going to hurt the reputation even more. And so we'll see how this plays out. Personally, I'm in the camp of fentanyl was responsible for the death of George Floyd. But I will concede that at the very least, you have to give, I guess, what they would call in like murder trials, a reasonable doubt or a shadow of a doubt. So from what I hear, I'm not sure, in like a murder, if you can just prove like a probable doubt or reasonable doubt, that is enough to escape the murder charge, right? And my position is that even if you don't think fentanyl was responsible for his death, you have more than enough reasonable doubt to basically exonerate the police officer who was involved in the incident. And so I'll just quickly rattle off a couple of thoughts, right? Here are 5, as I stand, incontrovertible facts. One is George Floyd repeatedly said that he can't breathe before he was ever taken out of the car and put on the ground. Before. Okay. Number 2, he's on camera during the incident. So check out the body cam footage. He's on camera ingesting the drugs as Derek Chauvin walked up to the car. So think about it. You're getting arrested. You don't want to get caught with drugs. That's not good. So what do? You hide the evidence by popping the pills. And he is on camera doing that. That's an incontrovertible fact. Number 3, while on the ground, he literally says, and on camera saying, again, body cam footage, I ate too much drugs. Okay, so he's acknowledging the fact that he ate too much drugs and that it's making him feel really bad. Number 4, one of the sort of medical experts or examiners said he had enough fentanyl in him to kill a horse, and it was over 3 times the sort of overdose level for a human being. Okay, and then number 5. The expert said that he had no life-threatening injuries from a physical standpoint. And those last 2 points, right, points 4 and 5, are really shown here on this kind of medical record. So the second kind of post by Jack Posobiec on Twitter is like, no life-threatening injuries identified. And then you see that fentanyl is 11, nanograms per milliliter. And the lethal overdose level is 3. So he's over 3 times the lethal amount. And he had other stuff into him as well, or inside of him as well, including meth. But that's beside the point. So these are just 5 facts, right? So, the most that I think a reasonable person can say is that it played a part in his death, right? It was a key factor, but it wasn't the causal reason. And my position is that it was actually the causal reason. Okay, so ultimately, I'm gonna move this one to an S tier as well. And the reason that I'm doing that is because this is what it takes to wake up normies. The Democrats don't matter. Republicans actually don't even matter. They're going to stay stuck in their ways 90+% of the time. What really matters in this culture war battle are independents and normies. That's it. Everybody else is fairly irrelevant, to be honest, especially given how contentious it is right now. And just speaking from my own past experience, I began to sort of gradually wake up through, stuff like the Covington kids story and the Jussie Smollett, story, and all these various stories, even Rittenhouse, right? I was like, oh, I didn't think about it. They were trying to take his life and he defended himself. That's interesting. So as these stories sort of come to the limelight, I'm like, wait a minute, there's 2 sides to every story. And just acknowledging that and hearing alternative viewpoints, it was enough to basically red pill me and wake me up. You don't even need to convince someone of the opposite position as being the truth. You simply need to make them aware of the opposite position. That alone is enough to make an independent or a normie wake up and materially shift this culture war battle. So Kanye and Candace, poking the bear, as it were, and making people actually think about the counter argument to their position is groundbreaking, because then you realize, oh shoot, The media has have been lying to me. The politicians have been lying to me, right? The internet has been lying to me. Google, Facebook, Twitter, like they've been lying to me, right? USA Today fact checkers, they've been lying to me. And that distrust is like the fundamental heart of what it means to, in my opinion, sort of wake up in this culture war and kind of actually materially shift the grounds. Okay. So next big kind of like major theme for today is this whole controversy around what I would call the weaponization of the state, right? So the first thing that happened is that an ABC journalist, he got raided earlier this year and then mysteriously disappeared. And it turns out he was working on the story about the Afghanistan withdrawal, the botched Afghanistan withdrawal by the Biden administration. And so that's, I guess, you know, maybe he had some access to some intel that he wasn't supposed to have access to. And the FBI, they decided to raid his apartment this past April. And for whatever reason, we're just realizing or noticing that he's been like missing for a long time. They came to his house with, I guess, Bearcat G2 armored vehicles, just crazy. And then somebody like remarked or responded to the raid by saying, I'm afraid he might be found floating in some body of water in the coming weeks. FBI DOJ will put out a statement that says died of apparent suicide, and that's going to be the end of the story. So who knows if that ends up happening. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. When you look at January 6th, the incident, to my knowledge, no police officer actually expired on that day. But one of the weirdest sort of side stories of this whole that whole situation was that in the weeks following the incident, the January 6th incident, police officers were mysteriously dying. And, oh, this person committed suicide. This person committed suicide. I'm like, what is going on here? There was never an explanation given about that. They just kind of mysteriously went away. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's how the CIA, FBI, feds, Capitol Police, the whole state apparatus, which has been weaponized against citizens and against the public, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how they operate. And, you know, this journalist just mysteriously is found floating in a lake. You know, I guess he went for a swim at 5 a.m. So, and this is actually following a more general theme, speaking of January 6th, where Steve Bannon was sentenced to 4 months in prison this past week. And what's crazy is that he was not even present at the Capitol on January 6th. And so I guess he has the opportunity to appeal. You know, we'll see how that goes by November the 15th. But it's not looking good. It's not looking good. And what is his big crime since he wasn't there at the Capitol? Well, he was insulting the members of the committee. So he said a bunch of nasty things about the members of the committee, you know, talking about Eric Swalwell, you know, in being in relations with Fang Fang, who was a communist spy or a Chinese spy. You know, stuff about Adam Schiff being a shifty Schiff. So he's always changing his story and making stuff up, et cetera, et cetera. So that contempt of Congress, I guess, is enough to land this individual in prison. Very, very heavy-handed. And then obviously the J6 committee, they couldn't quite wrap up the October saga here of the J6 committee without subpoenaing Donald Trump. So all Trump has to do in this case is like run out the clock because he is a former president. He probably has more pull. So the committee, I think they're slated to last through January, I believe, of next year. So he can probably stall until then and never have to show up. And that seems to be the expected outcome with this. But all that, I don't think what worked for the Democrats in 2020 is going to work in 2022, right? So obviously in November we have an election coming up. You know, hatred of Donald Trump and the MAGA people and all that, it was enough to help them win 2020, right? You get the press on your side. You just constantly be negative about it. You get everybody scared and afraid. You show all the numbers from COVID on the right side of the screen, and people are going to be you know, traumatized enough through that programming to actually vote for the alternative, Joe Biden. 2 years later, right, where we're in the middle of a depression/recession and nuclear war and you know, crime through the roof and everything else, people having trouble putting food on the table, gas prices are going up because of the whole OPEC situation, and people are like, we need more than Donald Trump and January 6th, guys. I think low-key people are like thinking that in their head, But yeah, that seems to still be the central focus of the Democratic strategy. So it probably won't serve them as well this time around. But we shall see. Overall, going to move this to the A tier. This whole weaponization of the state situation. Okay, so next up, I have to make a quick mention of Kari Lake. So Kari Lake, she had a pretty sick week, honestly. She was given like a presser, I guess, and she said she basically showed them examples of Democrats behaving badly and denying election results, which is what the press has been accusing her of doing for a long time. Will you accept the election results? Blah blah blah. So it says here from Daily Mail, Kari Lake flips the script. Republican shows 150 examples of Democrats denying election results, including Biden's own press secretary, as reporters ask her if she will accept the results of the Arizona governor race. So it's a two-tiered system, right? We are basically second-class citizens. Our, social betters can, say whatever they want about the elections of 2016 and so on and so forth, and zero consequence. But the moment that the non-woke crowd begins to do that, they're basically like criminals deserving of jail. And so just not going to press too much on this one. I just thought it was a great kind of like Kari Lake is a master of her craft. And part of that is because she was a career journalist herself. So she knows how the game is played. And every time I see her smack down the press, honestly, like something arises in me that's just incredibly just empowered. It's one of the most satisfying things. And she's a master of that. It gives me hope that even after Trump is fully out of the spotlight, there's a lot of people who tell the truth who are going to be able to carry the torch. So last major story for today is I have to talk about New York for a moment. So some interesting stuff is happening in New York. So we have a poll here that Lee Zeldin is actually ahead by 1 point in the polls over Kathy Hochul. And it should be noted, this is only one poll out of 9 or so. So it's not like the overall consensus view, but it's an interesting development nonetheless. And so I think it's going to be an interesting time this November to see what happens in New York, right? There's a reasonable chance that, as crazy as it sounds, New York may become a toss-up state, right? The polls are closer than expected. Project Veritas, they actually put out a report this past week with a staffer from New York City Mayor Eric Adams' team, basically putting him on blast for corruption and ineffectiveness. Really good reporting by them this past week, just exposing Eric Adams. And, look, I said back in January, I think, of this year in one of my videos, all Eric Adams had to do was keep control of crime. That's all he had to do. I think he could have even gotten away with the vaccine mandates, which he pushed on public sector workers, but not on private sector workers for whatever reason, because of the science, I'm sure. If he had just controlled crime, he would probably be fairly well received right now. But he didn't even succeed in that as a former cop. So because of that, I think he's really shaking right now in terms of popularity with folks. And there's some interesting things, right? I actually want to kind of go on the Wayback Machine, or to throw it back a little bit. So there's this interesting stat from back in 2018 when Ron DeSantis was running for governor against Andrew Gillum. And the polls showed him behind by a whopping 12 points, around this time of the year in sort of mid-October going into the election cycle. And as we all know, he ended up winning very narrowly, right? So here's the stats from that time. He won by 33,000 votes. Yeah, 33,000 votes, right? 0.4%. 33,000 votes made the difference between Ron DeSantis, who I would argue is the best governor in America. He's hands down and by a mile at that. Everything that he's just been extraordinarily effective. And even his handling of Hurricane Ian was so good that even Joe Biden had to commend him. Even the press had a hard time finding an angle of attack. Extraordinarily, he had a lot of the state rebuilt in terms of bridges and power and such within a couple of days. I mean, this dude was on top of it. And it's amazing because he couldn't have been any more different from his opponent. So people may remember, right, after Andrew Gillum had lost the race, he was found with male prostitutes in a hotel with drugs and kind of he himself intoxicated. He was completely out. So it was a disgraceful end to his campaign, his unsuccessful campaign against Ron DeSantis. Just crashed and burned into flames and really ended his political career. The left doesn't talk about this kind of stuff very much, right? They don't like to talk about these failures that they've had, these stumblings that they've had, and some of the weaknesses that this kind of exposes there. And then I'm not just going to give him a slap on the wrist either, because even though this happened in 2020, he's been doing this since before he lost the race. So just this is what came out last June. This guy, Andrew Gillum, he got hit with 21 federal charges, right? From the indictment alleging from 2016. Okay, so consider the timeline. He's been corrupt since he was a mayor, before he was a governor candidate, right? Before the 2018 race, right? So well before 2020, him getting drunk and basically banging dudes with drugs paraphernalia around him. Before that ever came, he's been basically doing conspiracy, wire fraud, and making false statements. So everything that you can imagine, right? Bribery, corruption, maybe money laundering, right? Using money that was given to him for one purpose, possibly to go hire male hookers. He's been up to it for a long, long time here. So just imagine, right, the night and day difference. We don't have a shared reality with these people anymore. Like it used to be like, well, do you want, universal health care, or do you want to stay privatized? Should an abortion be allowed, after 3 months or, after 6 months or whatever? It used to be like, oh, should taxes go up for this group or should it go up for this group? We used to be on the margin, right? Talking about individual little policy topics, and fundamentally we were on the same kind of wavelength or mindset, maybe 10 or so years ago. At least I feel that's the case. Nowadays, the elections really, really have consequences. And as our ideologies and worldviews have diverted so wildly, like 30,000 votes can actually make the difference, a night and day difference in terms of outcomes. So I will keep you posted. We'll see how New York kind of develops here in the culture war. But how cool would it be if New York became a toss-up state like Florida, right? So Florida is now decisively red. I think Ron DeSantis is beating his Democrat opponent by at least 4 to 6 points. I can't remember the exact, but he's well ahead, right? He's gonna soar into victory from the looks of things right now. How cool would it be if going forward in the years to come, New York becomes a toss-up state like Florida used to be? We shall see. Thanks for listening to today's rundown. If you liked what you heard, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.